I suspect in terms of ordinary law and ordinary public morality, she hasn't done anything wrong. But in terms of her own standards, in terms of the rants that she launched against Tory sleaze and Tory scum,
The Dean Sadari, for example.
exactly, she is hung as ever, or blown up by her own petard. It's very simple. If you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And this is the great problem with the left. The left, you may remember, there's a wonderful phrase, probably one of the least moral politicians in British history, Harold Wilson, declaring that the Labour Party is a moral crusade, or it's nothing. And of course, it's a lie. It is a parade of morality. It's a parade of public morality coupled with ordinary human behavior. And the trouble is, the left is a natural living hypocrisy. Interestingly enough, the idea of a party of sustained hypocrisy is, you will remember, Disraeli in his radical phrase in the 1830s, calling the Conservative Party that. But in fact, it is the Labour Party because it affects this higher morality. It sees itself as good. But then, like so many people who see themselves as good, they effectively license themselves to do bad. And Rayner is in exactly that position. And I think, again, we need to scrutinise Gawain very carefully what she actually did. I think there are two things that scream at you. She is saying, oh, I took legal advice and I followed legal advice. What we need to know is what her instructions to her lawyers were. Because the only reason you take legal advice on trusts, on tax, on stamp duty is if you want to avoid it, if you want to lower it. I don't think that Angela Rayner's, as it were, instructions to her lawyers were, please find the method by which I can most honestly pay the most tax on this transaction. In other words, she began her instructions, and this again is what Laurie Magnus, the magnate who is in charge of our public morality, will have to find out, if he possibly can, what her instructions were. And yet, of course, the entire rhetoric of this government, from the very beginning, in opposition, even before it was in the government, was we've all got to pay absolutely the maximum amount of tax we owe, and any attempt at reducing it is wicked, immoral, is the prerogative of Tories and the rich. That's the problem she's got us into. The other thing, and I feel very strongly about this, it's the use of her child. She's using her child as this is the disabled son. She's using him as a shield in exactly the same way that Keir Starmer used his son and his son's A-levels as a shield when he was actually using Lord Ali's flat as his campaign headquarters in the run-up to the last election. This shameless, oh, we don't put our family in the public eye, and yet the moment it's convenient to hide behind one of them, you do it. As we've again seen repeatedly with Starmer, we know more about his family than almost any other prime ministerial family. You know, the fact that he got a disabled brother, that his mother had some sort of terrible, perhaps motor neuron disease or whatever it was, that his father was a bloody toolmaker, but constantly using them as protection. But the worst thing of all is, of course, the financial element of it. Because of the negligence of our NHS, she and her then husband received a large settlement on behalf of the child, held in trust. And she used that money to buy herself out of the house in Ashton-under-Lyme so she could leverage herself into a super elegant flat in the smartest bit of Hove, on which an enormous amount of public money has just been spent, so that she could be seen, lounging around on a lilo in the sea with cocktails and a vape. That is the morality of Labour. That's the picture. And no wonder she was ashen-faced when she sat down behind the Prime Minister with tears in her eyes, making a perfect symmetry, if you remember, with when he was last sitting there, and Rachel Reeves had tears in her eyes. And the Prime Minister now looks like a figure out of classical mythology, and the solemn male surrounded by weeping women. It's a wonderful parody. But Gawain, you were advertising your role in the very heart of this absolutely opposite party that has never ever done anything wrong, that stands as a monument against the wicked corruption of both Tories and Labour. Shall we just flick forward to when Nigel is Prime Minister, thanks to all of your efforts? He's going to be subject to this scrutiny too, isn't he?
Yes.
How's he going to stand up to it? Because his living arrangements are pretty complex too, aren't there? There are different women, there are children by different women, there are houses, more than one house. How is that going to stand to the scrutiny, bearing in mind the evidence now that it will have brought down at least a deputy prime minister, if not a prime minister?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I hark back to this idea of the government being absolutely Puritan on the idea that everybody pay as much tax as they possibly can. I think back to Lord Salisbury, who, as Prime Minister, said that it was every Englishman's right and duty to withhold as much tax as they could from the government.
That was when we didn't spend very much.
Well, this is very true, but it's a very different attitude. And Nigel himself, he's been 30 years at the top of his particular tree. He has been investigated and scrutinised for decades. I think it's going to be very hard for anybody to find anything new. But the main point about Nigel is he stands there in front of you with a cigarette in one hand, a pint of beer in the other hand, and feet of clay. And he's never, ever
He's
pretending to.
human. He's human. He doesn't make any pretense
He
at super
doesn't say,
virtue.
"Look at me, I'm better than you," ever. He's never had this moralistic side to him. And therefore, because he forgives us our failings, we are more minded to forgive him his.
You're making him sound dangerously like Jesus Christ, which
No, good Lord, no. It's, no, he's far more a very naughty boy than he is a Messiah.
but I think it's really important we stress this, that what Nigel represents is the antithesis of the politics of virtue. And it's the politics of, this is what we forget. It's virtuous politicians who do damage. It's virtuous politicians who've got vast ideals, which they impose usually by the cruelest and the most brutal methods, thinking as always, of course, that essential element of Marxism, the end justifies the means.